Hello and welcome everyone to a new episode of Tawhid, Spiritual Unity of the Three Principles. I start forgetting all of this, like with the podcast and the show. So good to see you all here. And today we have a really, really special guest with us, JACK PRANSKY. And the topic today is the project Modello and the development of a community. I'm looking forward to this conversation because we have one of the best, guest speakers we could have for this conversation, and to point us, of course, to truth, and also because for those of you who doesn't know who Jack is, I have a brief bio here, so I'll just read it out. Dr. Jack Pransky is a Three Principles author, trainer, and practitioner, a coach of coaches, and counselor of counselors. Jack is a national and international consultant, speaker, and author who has worked in the field of prevention and community organizing since 1968. He authored several books, Somebody Should Have Told Us, Seduced by Consciousness, Modello, A Story of Hope for the Inner City and Beyond, Hope for All, Parenting from the Heart, Paradigm Shifts, and other few books, I reckon. Jack has been responsible for a number of accomplishments in the field, helping to create the first spirituality of prevention conference in the country with the Prevention Unlimited, the first state prevention law in the country, the first school climate improvement programs in Vermont's juvenile cold diversion system, two parent-child centers, and other successful community-based programs. He specializes in prevention from the inside out, and specifically in the Three Principles / health realization. In 2004, he won the Vermont Prevention Pioneers Award. Wow, what a huge achievement, Jack. I'm so glad to have you with us. And, I have a little story to share about my encounter with Jack in the 3P UK conference back in 2019. I remember back in 2019, especially at that time around the dates of the conference, I was a bit lost, because I was about to come back to Morocco while living in the UK for 6 years. And, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what's going to happen next. So I was just lost. And I remember, waiting until Jack finishes his seminar to ask him this question: what can I do next? What's the solution? So I was waiting for Jack to tell me and to enlighten me like what I could do and his advice. And to my surprise, I was really shocked by his answer, because he told me, just raise your hand like this and just pray for whoever is out there to guide you and show you the right way. I wouldn't lie, I was a bit, surprised by his answer and shocked. But, after a while, it made total sense. And it really, really helped me in ways I couldn't have imagined, that simple answer, because it was really deep. It really pointed me back to myself, that I'm the one who will be hearing the answer and nobody could tell me what to do next. And that divine mind is taking care of us no matter what. And who would have imagined after, a few years that I'll be running the show with Harry Derbitsky and, doing podcasts and working alongside amazing people in the 3P community and outside of the community, and doing this amazing work and sharing, the three principles with the world, and with Muslims and with non-Muslims. And so thank you, Jack, for that. That was really short and, one phrase, but it did change a lot. And I'm really glad to have you with us today.
Well, that's great, Omar. I appreciate that. I forgot all about that. So
Well, I still remember. How could I forget this?
well, that's great. I'm glad. And I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. I'll pass it over to Harry to say a few words, and then to you, Jack.
Yeah, great to see you, Jack. And
Good to see you, Henry.
yeah. And when Jack wrote the Modello book, he highlighted, in my mind, the greatest community project that I had ever seen. And even to this day, it stands out as the pinnacle of what Dr. Roger Mills helped create. And I just want to, I happened to go to the first conference where they were speaking, the women, and there were all these psychologists from 3P. All appeared dead in comparison to the women who came on stage. The aliveness, the appreciation, the gratitude, the wonderment that what they had stepped into was so powerful that it inspired me to go and work with the indigenous people. I said, if they can do what they're doing, I can do it with them. And it was interesting, Jack. I spent a tremendous amount of time with the indigenous people, but it turned out that the Muslim people were the ones where the community development and the acceptance of what I had to say occurred. They were like a training ground for that. But the Modello Project was the inspiration of everything that I've done. The energy of the people. And when Jack wrote the book, he kept it alive. He kept the feeling of this project. A lot of people don't realize how amazing Dr. Roger Mills was and what he created. It's a long time. And the other thing, Jack, I'd like you to deal with this simple question. Last time you were on addiction, alcoholism, and 3 principles, I mentioned there was no diversity. I'm just kind of curious how you see that evolving now in the development of the communities and so on in the 3 principles community. It's grown, but it's still not as diverse as it was when Dr. Roger Mill and Sid were alive. So with that in mind, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think that's because there have been fewer, percentage-wise, projects where people would go into low-income communities and help them see what they needed to see through the 3 principles. And when Roger Mills did that, he did it with an African-American, primarily African-American housing project.
And Hispanic as well.
Just a tiny bit of Hispanic people were there, and one white woman. And they set the stage, I think, for all such projects in the future. And of course, I was involved in the field of prevention, as Omar said, and that's the reason I got into it, is because of what was happening and what happened in that particular project. That's why I got into the 3 principles. Otherwise, I would not have even been interested. I was on a spiritual search at the time, but I wouldn't have really gone out of my way to find out about this guy, Sydney Banks, if it weren't for Roger Mills and what he did accomplished in Modello. And I think the lack of diversity, I mean, it's not completely undiverse, but it is less than it was because there has been less of an emphasis of people going and doing community projects. Don't know what else to say about that.
Well, it's grown, but it still doesn't have the feeling of what it had in those days. And it seems to me like Roger, because he was community oriented rather than individual development, it There was that different flavor. It was more of the community rather than individuals. And the feeling of the Modelo women, to me, was the collective energy. Each one was a powerhouse, but collectively, they were a tornado.
That's true. However, you still have people around like Rob Cook, who you talk to Rob Cook, who's an African-American fellow, and he has the same feeling.
Absolutely. And Beverly Wilson, and on it goes.
Around, and I mean, there's, there are people scattered around here and there that are beautiful, beautiful people with that same kind of energy.
Yeah.
And feeling. So what kind of questions do you all have?
Well, I would love if you would like to share with us what you've been seeing recently, your new insights and how it's unfolding for you, Jack. That would be really nice to hear.
You mean my own personal insights recently?
Yeah, or your clients' insights, or whatever you would like to share with us.
Well, my own personal biggest insight within the last couple of years has been when I was actually doing a coaching session with a client, and she was talking about how she is yelled at all the time by her father. She's 30 years old. She's still living in her parents' house. And the same dynamic that she grew up with when she was a little kid has kept up over all these years. And she's like suffering from the fact that he's yelling at her all the time. And all of a sudden it occurred to me, what if he didn't exist? Now that's kind of a strange statement to make, or a question to have, because you would think that he does exist because he's there yelling. But the only way that he can exist for her is how she takes him in with her own thinking. There is no separate, in a sense, there is no separate person yelling at her. There's only, I mean, he's there yelling or doing whatever he's doing, but she ends up taking him in through her own thinking. And that is what gets to her. The meaning that she makes of it with her own thinking is what gets to her. It's not the fact that her father's yelling at her that gets to her. It's all the meaning that we make with our own thinking. Now, when people truly grasp that, it changes everything, because otherwise we're kind of at the mercy of the outside world. And that's, of course, what the Modelo residents believed originally, that they were at the mercy of the outside world. They were at the mercy of the fact that the housing project was falling down around them, and that they were being oppressed, and that they were being treated very poorly, and that they were at the mercy of the drug dealers in their neighborhood, and they were at the mercy of the police coming in and like shaking down the place and messing around with people, and the housing authority was not paying attention to them, and the school system was treating their kids terribly. It's like they felt that they were at the mercy of that. But that's not true, as they found out later. They made meaning of what was happening to them. So one of the things that really struck me recently is that it's an amazing thing when we can separate out what's really happening out there. Like, for example, father yelling, housing authority treating people badly in the housing project, poverty, all true, but it's the meaning that we make of that for ourselves that ends up making the difference for us. And when you can separate out what's really happening from everything else, that's when we really have a leg up on the situation. So that's what's freshest for me these days.
Well, I love what you've been seeing, Jack. Absolutely resonates with me. Wow.
I keep
Wow.
learning. It's amazing. I remember asking Sid Banks once, so Sid, now that you've seen all this, have you know, is that like it for you, or do you just? He said, I learn every single day. Every single day I learn new. I learn more, and I have found that to be the case for myself too.
Well, me too, Jack. Me too. This last week, I've been really sick. I haven't been this sick for a long time, like since I was like a kid or something like that. But it was a really interesting experience for me, as at some point I had this really bad fever, and all I could remember is that I am not what is happening to me, but I am the one experiencing that. And this didn't occur to me as like a voice in the background, but as an experience, like really witnessing what's happening in that moment. And in that moment, it wasn't suffering. It was like pure bliss. I've never had this experience before, but it was humbling. It was overwhelming. I felt the change. And I'm grateful.
Wow, that's beautiful. But you know, it's a great example of what I was talking about, because what's true? The truth is that you've got a sickness. That's real. You've got a sickness. Your temperature is a certain number of degrees. That is true. Everything else is the meaning we make of it for ourselves.
Oh yeah.
Or the acceptance of the situation.
Well,
I really saw that when it happened. I really saw what you just said, Jack. I really saw it, like not just thoughts of it. I really saw it. I caught myself doing it, and it was mind blowing. And it happened just after we qualified to the semifinals. So everyone is celebrating outside, and me by myself in the house in my room. I was closing my door, and then I unlocked the door, so just to think like if anything happened to me, they will get in easily. And yeah, and then it started going up and up and up, and yeah, all of a sudden I had this experience where I saw that that I cannot really suffer. Like who I truly am cannot really suffer.
now that's the other thing. That's the other huge thing about the principles. You know, we are a part of universal mind. It's like we're a drop in the ocean. universal mind is the ocean. We're a drop. There's no separating us from the ocean when we're a drop in it.
Mm.
And therefore, all of the purest part of universal mind comes through our consciousness pure. So it's like this glowing light within us that we can only create the illusion of covering up with our own thinking.
Mm.
And it's there for every one of us, because that's who we really are. And when that's the other thing about, you know, if people realize that, they're fine. You know, it doesn't matter what problems they're experiencing in the world. When people have touched that, you know, who they really are, anything is possible. And it sounds like that's what you touched.
Like I had some really horrible insecure thought, like what's gonna happen with my parents, like if I pass out or if I die, and all my clients, and you know, like I just felt guilty and bad, and you know, like not wanting this to happen. And then all of a sudden it just like went off, and I had this experience, like
Yeah,
it's like waking up to
yeah, exactly what it is.
what there is to wake up
Mhm.
to.
Sid would say you woke up to your spiritual identity or your true self, or
That's what
or
happened.
in the
Yeah.
Muslim world, you would say you became detached.
Mm.
All the same thing. The way you described that, Jack, was very profound, very beautiful, I must say.
Thank you, Harry.
So we've got like two people raising their hands. Joe, do you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Jack.
Hi.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask was, what do you feel it was that prevented it from spreading beyond Modello to other communities? And what do you feel needs to shift for the mindset more to be seen as, I mean, I see it as like being a global community, really. There is only one community, and it goes beyond a personal identity to that greater consciousness. And so, yeah, around that, what do you feel actually needs to shift with our mindset to actually see it more that way? That if we help communities, we help ourselves.
Well, that's profound, you know. When we help communities, we help ourselves. That is really true. To get back to the first part of your question, it's not like it ended with Modello. You know, it did, and Roger Mills did while he was alive, he did a lot to spread it to other communities, some of which, like, for example, Coliseum Gardens in Los Angeles, had pretty much the same kind of results that Modello did. And there were other places along the way that had really excellent results. Fewer and fewer people in the Three Principles world, percentage-wise, are doing this kind of work now than they were then. And I think that's why it has not kept spreading at the pace that it did originally. But there are projects that are happening now doing that. Since I officially retired, I haven't really kept up with a lot of them, but it's a beautiful thing when people step away from themselves to help others. And as you were suggesting, in the process of doing that, we help ourselves. And it's, I mean, when Sid had his experience, I was just thinking about this the other day. Sid had his experience, and he could have kept it to himself. He had this profound experience, and he could have just kept it and lived a very happy life. Now, he knew that part of what he experienced was the I don't know what the word is, I was going to say the word need, and I was going to say the word want. Neither of those are really accurate. His desire was to give it away. And when he gave it away to others, he was expecting that that's the way it would keep spreading. I keep seeing Jim Beck over there. And if you're the Jim Beck that I think you are there like one of the first 3 people that ever spoke to Sid after his enlightenment experience. Is that true?
You're muted, Jim.
Well, I would say yes, that is true, Jack. It may have been a larger number of people, but I was definitely one of the first non-relatives that ran into Sid and met him and heard his story. And, through the next few months, I experienced my own changes. Regarding what you were saying about what he saw, there are all these different stories about what Sid saw, and Sid tells his story on a couple of the videos. But what now from this point of view, and how I'm applying it in my own journey, Sid saw his own. He saw the way the world worked. He had the answer. He had gone beyond anybody's, most people's perception of level of consciousness. And it was so profound for him that he realized that he had the answer for humanity. If humanity could experience what he had been experiencing, and the world would be a place without suffering. He was overwhelmed by the idea of human suffering, and his mission really, as I learned about it, was to help those suffering people, which was almost everybody in humanity. And having been in a previously, when he had his first insight that led later, 3 days later, to his enlightenment, he was in a setting of a psychological workshop. And so here were psychologists that were given the mission, the calling, to relieve human suffering, in this mental understanding. But Sid saw it as all suffering, that all suffering could end, that his mission was to help that. His mission was to try and share it. People couldn't hear him as he tried to share it for the first 10 months. They couldn't get over. They were all people that had known him before. They couldn't really accept what had happened to him, the change that had happened to him. Only his wife and others that were really close, very close. But his wife was the one that saw it the most. But Sid saw through using common sense, which is the way mind delivers to us, that helping a psychologist, helping trainers of psychologists, helping anybody in the helping professions, the compassionate sector of of all society, those that wanted to help, the teachers, the social workers, the medical health professionals, all the health professionals. These are the pastors. These are the people that in their lives were committing to relieving suffering, even coming out of a lost place. So ultimately, he was sharing in that way, but his mission was always to relieve human suffering. And as he saw it through the three principles, that would mean that the level of consciousness of individuals and the collective level of consciousness of society would learn that these three simple principles and how they were functioning through them, whether they had realized it earlier or not, and how everybody functioned through them. And as you learn about them, as you become more aware of them, then you are raising your level of consciousness, and that is the journey, and that is how Sid shared it. And as you follow Sid's life from those days forward, you see how he went out and he shared with health professionals in the very beginning. He was still on Salt Spring Island. In those days in Salt Spring, he was sharing with common man. He wasn't choosing psychology at that point. He was waiting for it. But in the meantime, whoever would listen, whoever could grow, whoever could experience this was an example for others. And so that's who gathered around Sid. That's who began to hear him at first. They weren't specifically healthcare professionals or any of these other groups. They were ordinary folk. But people who had rejected society and yet were still lost as they tried to blame the outside and get to different places where they would be happier. But ultimately, the real truth is that we create our worlds, and we don't have to run away to anywhere. We just have to have a look inside, and we have to see our power, our participation in it. That's the only way we change. And as we learn to grow deeper, we must share.
Yeah.
And
that's what blows me away. What blows me away is that this started from one person, and now there are probably hundreds of thousands of people around the world who have seen this.
Yeah.
And it's all happened one person at a time, or one organization at a time, or one community at a time. And it never ceases to amaze me how this has grown. And it's because of the whole notion of not keeping it to yourself, but giving it away. And as Joe was saying, that helps us too, because we go deeper when we're giving it away.
So true, Jack, so true. And another kind of icing on the cake or deeper idea of this is, here was this guy who was a welder, a hothead, an very, very insecure person. In his world, in his working world, he was insecure. He had a job. He was doing well. He was making a good living. He was supporting his family. He was doing, you might say all the right things, but he was lost. He was unhappy in his world, in his small world of a family. His wife was a nurse. She had more education than he had. He was afraid of anybody that had education before this experience. He would tell one story he told when he was in Scotland working in a welding company, maybe 10 workers and a front office. He was terrified to go into the office part because that's where the higher educated, everybody in there was smarter than him. everyone in there was above him in his own eyes. Sid was afraid to walk into a bank in Scotland before he saved his money in what they called a post office savings account. He was afraid to set foot in a bank, literally. He was that insecure, and yet a wonderful guy, a good friend, a good father, a good husband, but just as everyone else around, a lost soul. And then he had that experience. And if you see, if you watch him in a video, if you listen to a tape, if you read his books, it's almost incomprehensible that this was written by a person who left school at 14, had no education, and was afraid to walk into the office of a business.
Yeah, and just to bring it back to community work, it's like Roger Mills had the same kind of give it away attitude that Sid had.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one who really took the chance to go into this very rough low-income community where everybody was from a different culture than he was, different race than he was, and just start. He didn't know what he just knew how he was going to start. He had no idea what he was going to do, and it just spread. You know, at first they tried to do everything in their power to get him out of there. They thought he was crazy, and they tried to make him go away. But because of what Roger learned from Sid about people's health inside themselves, and only their thinking can make it look like they don't have it, you know, in his mind it was, of course they're going to treat me this way because of the way they see things. You know, of course. He had this, of course. That, and when you see of course, it's like you can't get thrown off the mark like you would normally.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, yeah, things don't phase you like they did. Of course they're going to see it this way. Of course they're going to want to try to get rid of me.
Sure. And another magnificent thing is that Roger had changed himself. Roger had grown. He knew what it was to experience change. Exactly. He was a well-respected psychologist, a PhD, and he had to take a cold, hard look at all of his training and all of his practices and all of the techniques that he had been in and all of his attempts to help, and realize that they weren't, that he had to get rid of it all, that he had to go to this deeper thing, this understanding of how, you know, why we're here and how we're here, and to be able to share that with any person. And it's really it's a magnificent story. I have not read your book. I'm ashamed to say, but you're not alone. I don't read. I only read Sid Banks, but I intend to read it. I heard about Modelo before you wrote your book, and I saw it as an incredible step. Here's a little story. Last Saturday, Sunday, my wife and I were invited to a friend's birthday, and it's one of the first gatherings for us since COVID hit. But there was about a dozen people there, now all great friends from 40 years ago, actually. And there's one couple there that you will know of, Jack. And I mentioned something that had come to me. Somebody had mentioned to me recently, like within the last week, and it was about somebody who, a person who had narrated your book, Risa, and it was her parents that were their good friends. And so, you know, I brought it up and they, oh yeah, right. Yeah. And then they talked about her coming up with an idea of a documentary and perhaps sharing that with you, and how she had reached out to people, connections that she had in the film industry. And she shared the book, shared the audio book. And this one producer had come back with her raving about the opportunity that this beautiful book that you've shared was for a documentary. But her comment was, it's more than just a documentary. This should be a Netflix series. There's so much in this story. And, you know, that hit me, Jack. And I want to read this book, but on top of that, I'm wondering, you know, there's incredible potential in sharing, you know, in the mainstream. Three
Well, let me
people.
bring people up to date about what has happened here.
Please do.
Because you know, Teresa, bless her heart, she's a wonderful person. So she narrated the Modelo book for, you know, as an audiobook. But even after that, it was like I had tried to write a screenplay for a motion picture, major motion picture, and I did my best, but I was not able to do it well enough to catch the attention of the powers that be in the film industry. And so I was trying periodically, I would try to get this, to find a co-screenwriter to work with me on it, preferably an African-American woman. I kept running into possibilities that never materialized. Possibilities never materialized. Possibilities never materialized. So I was in this myself. I was doing it alone. I knew it had to be done. And then once I talked with Risa, and Rob Cook somehow got involved, then the three of us started forming this little Modelo screenplay committee, so to speak. And that has now expanded to about 5 people. And we found an African-American woman to write the screenplay with me. And it was her idea to turn it into not a movie, but a TV series, because for a movie, you know, people just go to the theater and then they go home and, you know, that's it. But people live with TV series. And so it's looking more promising right now than it ever has been before to actually turn this into a TV series. Of course, I was thinking small. This woman I'm working with thinks huge. I thought a mini series. She was thinking 3 years long worth of a series. So that's where things stand now. In fact, it would have been further along than it is, but she got COVID like about 3 times in a row. And so she's had a little brain fog to contend with. But we have a meeting tomorrow of our whole committee. So one of the reasons it was perfect timing with this particular group, you know, today, in terms of getting me revved up for this committee tomorrow.
Well,
so
good.
What other questions do people have about Modelo?
Just before, just sec. I just want to make 2 points about Roger. As you were talking, of course, it brings back feelings of what was there. And the 2 outstanding things that I saw with Roger was, the first thing, these women adored him, loved him with all their hearts. They outpoured. He wasn't just a teacher. He wasn't just a mentor. He was part of who they were, and they were part of who he was. And the feeling of adoration for him was just amazing. And friendship, the warmth that they exude was just amazing. And the other thing that was outstanding was Roger would come in a sports jacket and a tie, and he was kind of deader than they were, and yet together he wasn't this high energy personified person. He was Roger, and in that Roger, he found he didn't change who he was. He wasn't dynamic. They were dynamic. He was just part, and yet he was the focal part, and he kept growing after Modello. He kept expanding after that. But it was very noticeable that Roger was not full of beans and full of life. They were.
He was not a very charismatic person, really.
Exactly. But that's who he was. He just was. But they did say he was a bulldog. When he put his teeth to a project, he went all the way in. And yeah, and so I wanted people to understand that, because you don't change who you are. There's not an image of what a leader is in 3 principles. The 3 principles say, be yourself. That's what will work.
Right. And it reminded me of something else that Joe brought up. In the early days, with Modello and with the first kind of few projects that he expanded into after that, he actually hired staff that were trained in the 3 principles, and they worked the project. They lived there. No, they didn't live there, but it was like they lived there. You know, they were there all the time. And then in later projects, they had the idea that they could just do training, train some people who already worked in the projects, and it would have the same effect. Well, it didn't. It didn't have the same effect. Without having staff people that were actually trained to do 3 principles work with people, it did not have the same kind of impact as those initial projects had. And, you know, I'm not saying that good results didn't happen, which they did, but not at the same kind of level as Modello and Coliseum Gardens. And that should be a lesson for us all. You know, people need to be there, who have had the experience themselves, and spread it like that.
And Roger was an incredible judge of horse flesh. Both George and Roger were exceptionally good at picking people who could shine. And I remember there was this big black woman, and you could see that at one point, she was as tough as nails, and she was the most influential person in the community. When Roger was able to bring her into the fold, she opened up the project.
That's true. That was Virene.
That's right.
And I think I called Virene Rosie in my book, but and may she rest in peace. She it's a shame she's not still around.
Well, her spirit is around.
She was the only one who would not let me interview her for the book. She would not let me interview her.
Okay, I would love to have Razmik unmute himself. He's been waiting for so long. Thanks for your patience, buddy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jack, and everybody else for sharing what you just shared. So my question isn't directly related to the Modello project, but I think, Jack, you're the right person to ask this. I'm very interested in building collective resilience in very uncertain environments. I'm joining from Armenia, and we have a very volatile environment. There was a war 2 years ago. Right now, there's a group of 120,000 people kind of stranded with no gas. And honestly, what I went through for the last few years was a proof to the three principles for me. Just like for me, if something is shared and people claim that it is true, then it would have to be true always. And I kind of had that experience even throughout my suffering and seeing how people suffer, just observing how mind can unfold through me. And I'm trying to share it as best I can. I've been doing training courses on resilience and things like that. But every time a situation like this unfolds, I'm noticing like my inner desire to share more and somehow make it more collective or scalable. But I'm also noticing this part in me that is kind of reticent and like almost doesn't want to say too much, thinking that it might come across as somewhat disrespectful to the individuality of somebody's pain. I mean, and again, I've witnessed how I can just be present and something is gonna come through. But anything you could share in terms of helping people stay resilient, stay present in this kind of circumstances would be helpful.
Well, there's a lesson in how Roger Mills went into Modello that's applicable to everything else. He did not go in talking to people about the three principles.
Mhm.
He went in seeing everybody's health and seeing how people were lost just because of how they had learned to use their thinking. And so he saw through all that to the real person behind the facade, behind the suffering, behind the anger, behind the violence. And he just pretty much went in with love. And he was there with people with love. Now, even though they tried to get rid of him, you know, they had to know, I mean, they were testing him out, basically. They were trying to see whether he would stick around, because they've had a lot of people that would come in and say they were going to do things, and then it would get tough for them and they would leave. So this notion of being with people with love is all we have to do. All we have to do to go into this kind of situation that you were talking about. It's all we have to do. And we just be there with them, help them get their needs met. And when there's an opportunity, when something comes up naturally from them, where the three principles would be something to be said applicable to them about that at the time, that's when we would say it. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. That's a beautiful answer, and I think that's pretty much how it unfolded. It's just, I think, as you observe all this unnecessary suffering, often like kind of inflicted by, I don't know, dictators, all kinds of people. You just sometimes I'm thinking, how could we give this a momentum? How could we make this more somewhat scalable? But as you said, I mean, if I'm me talking with somebody and they just lost their children in war, I mean, I'm just going to be there and hug them and see what's going to come through. Like, I'm not going to start talking about the principles.
Exactly. And the other part of that is staying in our health ourselves. You know, we've seen something in our own life that has really helped us in our life. That gives us our solid core, so to speak. And we are not going to let ourselves be thrown off course by no matter what is happening out there. You know, sometimes we'll lose it because we always lose, you know, we're human beings, we will lose it. But we lose it and come back to our solid core of health. And that's what people pick up on. So it's a combination of that and the love we put out to other people. That's what works.
And to know that what you're sharing is love, and it has its own spiritual path of direction, but it's getting out there. It's getting out there.
Yes.
When I started this show with the Muslim communities, it was getting out there slow. And then at a point, it reached a tipping point. And then all of a sudden, the route, the path was revealed of how I could share with the community. But it would just, you're doing it. That's why it's an illusion. You think you're not, and you are. We can tell. Everybody here can feel you are doing it, and just keep doing it.
Yes.
And it will happen. I don't know when. Nobody knows that, but it will happen.
Yeah. I see Lee
Absolutely.
has a hand up for quite a while.
Thank you for that.
I don't see anyone having his hand up. Thank
I see it.
Razmik for your question. That was powerful, and I agree with what Jack and Harry shared on that about yeah, you're doing it, mate. Just keep sharing. Maybe you don't see it now, but it will become obvious to you what to do
Oh yeah,
next.
we
and what
have
to say
Sue.
next.
Sue has a question.
Oh yeah, we got Sue.
Okay,
Hi,
great.
Sue.
You're unmute yourself, Sue. No, Sue, you're still muted.
Yeah, I've just
Oh,
snared.
there, here I
Yeah.
am.
There you go.
Hi, Omar. Hi, Harry, and hi, Jack, who I haven't met yet.
Nice to know.
Yeah, I wanted to just interject something. Omar and Harry know that I teach the 3 principles at university in Southern Oregon, and every I'm just saying what Harry just said. Every semester we get more and more people, and we have an ongoing discussion group that's in person that I lead, and every time we have a new 3 principles class course, we get more and more people, and then they ask more and more questions, and they come in with confusion, and I don't believe it, is this a cult, you know, all this head stuff. And so in my spring course, I plan to use you, Harry and Omar, some of your podcasts for my thing. And is it okay, Jack, for me to include your books and things too?
Of course.
Of course. Of course.
He's saying more than a course. He says.
Yes. Well,
Meant to be there to be
usually
helpful to others.
each term I use 1, 2 or 3 books that we focus on, and use videos from those. Plus, I got to throw Elsie and Chip and the other Pranskys in, and but it's really powerful to watch and hear people going, oh my gosh, what do I call this? I call it a feeling. I call it an aha. It's an insight. What's an insight? You know, And next course, I'm going to be using Michael O'Neill's Inside Out, just to kind of, okay, this is what an insight is from the inside out. So I'm glad to meet you, Jack. I hope one time, maybe in the UK or someplace, that I get to meet you all.
You might find that my book, Somebody Should Have Told Us,
Yes.
is one of the most accessible books, apparently. That's what people tell me. And that's helped a lot of people first coming into the principles.
Yes, that was one of the first books I read outside of Sid's books.
Mm.
And I thought, what a perfect title, because it's catchy. I like catchy.
It's because everybody kept saying it.
I know it. I know it.
Well, I guess all of Jack's books are got catchy titles. You know,
Well, my
like
next-
Seduced by Consciousness is,
Yeah,
wow,
I like it.
mind blowing.
Well, my next course, my winter course, the name of it
That one's a showstopper.
it is a quiet mind in a crazy world, but I don't have Sid's name in it. Sid's name is like a subtitle. And then the whole thing is about Sid and, you know, using your books and stuff. So I think myself that the name of the course needs to catch attention. Boom, 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 like that, like yours.
Great.
Great.
Love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm not
keep-
doing, I'm just being, just
Even
being,
better, Sue.
being me.
You know, that reminds me.
Oh,
You froze for a second, Jack.
Yes.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Huh. When people get involved with the three principles and really see something for their own lives, I have noticed that people are at a crossroads. They can either say, how can I make money using this? Or they say, how can I help humanity?
Mm.
And it's the people that say, how can I help humanity, that I would choose to listen to. That's my own personal thinking.
Well, me too.
Mhm.
I love that, Jack. Love it.
so maybe this is a good place, Omar, for us to, that's a powerful statement, Jack. It's a very simple one, but it really highlights, I think, the essence of the difference that Sid walked into the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
He never looked at the money.
Hmm.
He in my mind, all he wanted to do was share.
That's right. And that's what we who have been affected by this we would do well to have the same focus.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
And trust that the universe will take care of us.
Oh yeah.
And surprisingly, it does.
Somehow.
Beautiful. I would love to take again, if anyone wants to share anything before we end this beautiful conversation. Oh, that was just beautiful to like that was a treat to have you. Oh, we've got Xander. Go on, Xander.
Hi, hello, Harry, and Omar, and hello, Jack.
Whoa.
In the hour that I've been listening to this conversation, I've heard some wonderful stuff. I found it to be very inspiring, and no one's name dropping, but some of the names that have come up during this discussion, excellent reference, source for anyone who is starting out in the three principles. I mean, some of the names that have come up, yourself, Jack, not so much that Harry, we take him with a pinch of salt. I'm joking, of course. But yeah, very inspiring. And I feel, how am I able to say very inspiring if I don't feel inspired myself? So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Your background is inspiring to me.
I was wishing you would say the same thing for me to me about my background. If you can see the little thingy next to me. Yeah, it was so good to have you with us today, Jack. I keep always saying that truth is our soul's favorite music, and this conversation was it. I enjoyed every second of it, and thanks to our participants today for sharing this space with us, and for your questions, and thanks to my co-host Harry Derbisky as always.
And we'll see you next year, guys. We'll have a whole
Oh
new
yeah,
series.
this was
Happy
the
New Year,
last.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
Oh.
Yeah, this was the last episode of the first seast of the show. So we will see you in 3 weeks.
All right.
All right, thank you, guys.
It's the first season, third year of we're doing this, Jack.
Oh, great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure for me. I love these kinds of conversations, and this one was particularly nice.
Got to know, Jack.
And also, thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim.
You too, Jack.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay,
guys.
so
Bye-bye.
all right.